important form of hydrogen, okay, which is present in the nature, that is water. As you all know, the chemical formula of water is H2O, wherein 2 hydrogen atoms are bonded to 1 oxygen atom. Now talking about water, water as you all know, it is a very crucial compound for the survival of living beings, right? It is the most important constituent in the life of the living beings. Okay, without water it is not even possible to imagine our life. As you all know, our body consists of around 65% of water, okay, and also the plants contain around 95% of water in them, right? And also water in the nature, it is not distributed, equally in equal proportions. Like for example, if you take about the oceans, okay, they will have 96%. Okay, some part of groundwater has 0.6% of water. So in different proportions it is being distributed in the nature, right? Okay, so this is the main basic thing what we know about water. Let's talk about the physical properties of water firstly, and then we will move on to the chemical properties and so on. Okay, so talking about the physical properties, as you all know, water has a boiling point of 100 degrees Celsius, right? And if you're talking about the melting point, which is in the form of ice, is 0 degrees Celsius. So boiling point of water is how much? 100 degrees Celsius. So if you have to convert it to Kelvin, it comes around 373 Kelvin. And if you're talking about the melting point, it is around 0 degrees Celsius. It is said to be 0 degrees Celsius, right? And as you all know, water is said to be a universal solvent. Now, universal in the sense, it can dissolve almost most of the compounds in it. For example, if you take alcohol or carbohydrates, which are the covalent compounds, which do not actually dissolve in some of the solvents, water can actually dissolve them. Okay, so even the covalent compounds can be dissolved in water, and that's why it is said to be a very good solvent. That's why they say it is the universal solvent. Water is said to be a universal solvent. And as you all know, they can dissolve ions or molecules, and it helps in the transportations of ions and molecules in our body too, and helps in the metabolism, right? Okay. So density of water is around 1 gram. Density is around 1 gram. Okay. That is gram per cm. Okay. So this is about the density. And what about the molecular mass if you have to calculate? Molecular mass would be 18 grams. Okay. You can just calculate it. 2 into 1 and oxygen 16 into 1, how much is it? So you get 18 grams. Okay. I'll explain that. So hydrogen, you have 2 atoms. So this becomes 2 into 1, mass is 1. And then you have oxygen atoms. So here plus oxygen is 16. 16 into how many atoms are present? There is only 1. So you get totally 18 grams. So this is the molecular mass of water. Okay. Now talking about the other physical properties, such as you know that water has high heat of vaporization, it has high heat of fusion. As you all know, it is also having high boiling point, high melting point, and water is said to be having high dielectric constant. Dielectric constant. Now dielectric constant is said to be a new term for it, right? So here dielectric constant in the sense, suppose a compound is said to be in an electric field. Now suppose water is said to be in an electric field or electrolysis is taking place. Here the amount or the capacity of that particular substance to absorb the electrical energy, how much it would be, that is dielectric constant. In an electric field, a compound, how much energy or how much electric energy it can absorb, that's the measure, and that's dielectric constant. So for different substances, they will have different dielectric constant, whereas water's dielectric constant is said to be high. Okay, so all these are said to be high. High latent heat of vaporization, fusion, high heat capacity, high dielectric constant, high boiling point, high melting point. So why are these unusual and unique properties which are present in water? Why are these? What is the main thing which is to be noted here? Why is this happening with water? Okay, that is due to hydrogen bonding. Extensive hydrogen bonding is present in water. Okay, I will explain it to you when I talk about the structure of them. Okay, then you will understand it in a better way. So extensive hydrogen bonding is present in water, which is to be remembered and stored in your mind. Okay, and this was about the physical properties of water. Let us move on to the structure of water. Now talking about the structure of water, as you know, how many hydrogen atoms are present here? There are 2 hydrogen atoms with 1 oxygen atom. So 2 hydrogen are present. So hydrogen, the atomic number is 1, which means that it consists of only 1 electron, right? Oxygen is 8. So if you have to write the electron configuration, 1s2, 2s2, 2p, 4 plus 2 is 6, 6 plus 2 becomes 8. Now valence electrons, that is the outermost shell electrons, how many are present here? 4 plus 2, there are 6 electrons which are present, right? Now if you have to determine in the form of Lewis structures, how do you write it? So here there are 2 hydrogen atoms with 1 electron each. So there is 1 electron for each hydrogen atom, right? Then oxygen, how many are present here? 6 electrons are present. So 1 would be for bonding with hydrogen. Okay. So 2 are done. How many moles? 4 more. So I'll put it here 1, 2 and 3, 4. Done. Now here this hydrogen becomes stable like this, right? And if these are forming a bond here by the sharing of electrons, now oxygen also tends to attain stability. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But these are not involved in forming the chemical bonds, you see, right? Only these electrons are bonded over here, whereas this remains as it is. They do not involve in bonding, which means that they are lone pairs present in. Okay, so here totally there are 4 electrons, which means there are 2 pairs present, right? So these are said to be 2 lone pairs are present here, which do not involve in the formation of chemical bond, right? So here 2 lone pairs are present. So because of these 2 lone pairs, there is some disturbance in the angle of this structure. Okay, that is OHH bond angle is being disturbed or distorted, and their shape changes, okay, into a bent structure, something like this. So they will actually be linear, but due to the presence of lone pairs, there is repulsion between their angles, and that is how they get the shape, that is bent shape. So the structure of water is said to be having bent shape or angular shape. Okay, so here the angle, this HOH bond angle would be around 104.5 degree. Okay, so here there is distortion and there is a bent structure, wherein the angle would be around 104.5 degree, and the OH bond length will be of around 95 picometer. 10 to the power minus 12. Okay, so this is the bond angle and this is the bond length. So bond angle is 104.5 degree and this is the bond length. Okay. So this is about the structure of water. So this is not the structure, this you have to remember. That is the bent shape or angular shape and the bond length as well as the bond angle. So this water has a bent structure or an angular structure due to the lone pair of electrons present, that is distortion. Now, if you check these both of the atoms, one is oxygen atom and hydrogen atom, which one is said to be most electronegative here? Electronegative atoms are the ones which can pull the electrons towards itself, right? So along the period, the electronegativity keeps increasing. That means oxygen should be most electronegative atom when compared to hydrogen. So what does oxygen do? It tends to pull the electrons towards itself. So these electrons are slightly pulled by the oxygen atom. So what happens to the polarity here? Polarity in the sense, what happens to the charges? This oxygen atoms attains a partial negative charge, okay, and here this attains a positive charge, right? And as you can see, because of this pull of electrons or the separation of separation of charges between the atoms is said to be the dipole moment. Two poles are there, one is positive and negative, right? And that's why we call them as dipole moment. Okay, so this is dipole moment. Due to the presence of highly electronegative atom, there is pull of electrons towards itself, which creates the separation of charges, and that is what is the dipole moment. So dipole moment is said to be high for water. Okay, why? Due to the presence of highly electronegative atom, that is oxygen. Okay, now as I told you, all these properties, that is physical properties, like there is high latent heat of fusion, high latent heat of vaporization, there is high melting point, boiling point, it is a good solvent. All these properties I told you, right? And I also told the reason why is this actually happening in water. Unusual property in water, unique property in water. That is due to the extensive hydrogen bonding. Now if for an example, if you have a glass of water, there are many number of water molecules are present, right? Now these have definite properties, okay, all these like high dipole moment. Now you see that almost most of the water molecules are associated with each other, right? They are not separated there, they are associated. So due to this association property, because of hydrogen bonding, water has this unique ability of having so many properties. That is, okay. So here, if I have to talk about hydrogen bonding, extensive hydrogen bonding, suppose there is a molecule of water here. Hydrogen bonding is nothing but, here this hydrogen, again it forms a bond with another oxygen atom. Okay, then this has four hydrogen. Then this hydrogen again it forms a bond with oxygen. So this is said to be the hydrogen bonding. So because of this hydrogen bonding with another molecule of water, that is to the oxygen atom, there is association of the molecules. There is summing of the molecules here, right? So here, because of this hydrogen bonding, water has unique abilities. Okay, that is why these physical properties are said to be very unique for water. That is due to the extensive hydrogen bonding. So extensive hydrogen bonding also helps in the association of molecules. Association in the sense there is adding up of molecules. So here oxygen, there is a bond between another molecule of water with the hydrogen. That's why we say this is a hydrogen bonding, extensive hydrogen bonding. What I was talking about is this one. Okay, so let us move on to the structure of ice. So water which is converted into solid state becomes ice, right? Now ice, as you all know, it is said to be a three-dimensional structure, right? And here there is vacant spaces in between, so it is said to be an orderly arrangement of hydrogen bonds, right? So here there is orderly arrangement. It is like layers, different layers are present of the same thing. So this is giving you a idea of how the structure of ice is present. So when this structure is being formed, that is a 3D structure, that is an orderly structure which is present in layers is formed here, there is creation of this vacant spaces, or we say it is said to be an open structure. So when these water molecules become ice, when they get converted into solid state, they arrange themselves such that they form layers, okay, and these layers will have vacant spaces in between. And because of this, what happens? The density of ice becomes very less. Okay, whereas in the liquid state, all the water molecules are associated with themselves due to the hydrogen bonding. Here also there is hydrogen bonding, but this orderly arrangement, okay, makes them create vacant spaces, and what happens there? Density becomes less, and that's why you say that ice floats on water. So density is mainly because of this structure which is formed. So it is like a cage-like structure which is formed, and because of this there are open spaces in between, and density will be obviously there. So when the X-rays were passed, okay, when the X-ray study was done through this structure, it was found that each oxygen atom is surrounded by 4 other oxygen atoms tetrahedrally, which means that one should be behind, on the top, and then 2 on the sides. So there are 4 oxygen atoms for each oxygen atom in the center. Okay, so it is surrounded by 4 other oxygen atoms. So this is what the study was found about the ice. So because of this open structure or the cage-like structure which is formed, the density of ice becomes less, and that's why ice floats on water. So coming back to the chemical properties of water, so let's just discuss some of the chemical properties. Okay, so first one, which is an important one, that is water is said to be amphoteric in nature. Now ampho in the sense, amphoteric, that is water can act like an acid as well as a base. Okay, very unique property, right? So here amphoteric in the sense the water can act like an acid as well as a base. Now there was a scientist named Bronsted who gives this acid and base theory. He says that if water has to act like an acid, then it reacts with ammonia. Okay, if it is acting like an acid, then it reacts with ammonia, or if it has to act like base, then it reacts with hydrogen sulfide. Okay, so he says that this amphoteric nature says that water can be an acid and as a base. So it can be acting like both acid as well as a base. That's why the word says amphoteric. Okay, both of them, both of the properties it can have. Now let us try writing the reaction and identify how water can be acting like, whether it is an acid or a base. Okay, so this theory was given by Bronsted. So about this Bronsted theory of acids and bases, you will be learning it in your the acid base chapter, that is equilibrium chapter. For now, what is the theory? Know that. Okay. Now, if water has to act like an acid, then it reacts with ammonia as well. So let us try writing the reaction. So here H2O, okay, it is reacting with ammonia. So NH3, okay. So this is said to be a reversible reaction, and that's why this arrow is being given here. So NH3 with water, here water is said to be acting like an acid, which means that according to Bronsted, water has to give away a proton. So here one hydrogen has to be given to ammonia. Okay. So the one who gives the electrons is said to be an acid. That's what Bronsted says. So here if one proton is given, okay, loss of protons. So here this ammonia becomes NH4 because it is taking up a proton. So this becomes NH4 plus, and then what about water? If one hydrogen is removed, how does it form an ion? It becomes OH minus. Got it? So Bronsted says that the one who is losing a proton acts like an acid. Okay? If it has to act like a base, then it reacts with hydrogen sulfide. So let us check that. So H2O with hydrogen sulfide, reversible reaction. So it can be converted into this reaction also, reversible. That's why this arrow is being put here. So what happens here? If this has to act like base, then it has to take up electrons or take up a proton. So from where? From hydrogen sulfide. So from hydrogen sulfide, if one proton is given here, what should happen then? What would be the product which is formed? This should be H3O plus because one hydrogen is given that side. And what happens to hydrogen sulfide? This will remain as HS minus. Right? So this is how Bronsted says that water can be having both the properties depending on which reactant is present, and the ability to take up proton and give away the protons. It can act like an acid or a base. So if it is reacting with ammonia, it is said to be acting like an acid. Here it is reacting with hydrogen sulfide, that's why it acts like a base. Okay, so even for a better understanding, if you are talking about the self-ionization of water, it can ionize itself, reacting with another molecule of water, and it can be acting like an acid and base. I'll show you how. So here, if water is acting like an acid, okay, in the first case, and another water molecule, if it can act like base. Okay, so here I will put it as acid 1 and base 2, so that you understand which is the first acid and which is the base which is taken. So here both of them, they can undergo autoprotolysis. Autoprotolysis in the sense there is change of protons or there is giving up of protons. Okay, so here one can give away the protons, the other one can accept protons. So base tries to accept protons, acid tends to give away protons. So here if this reaction takes place, then what would be the product? So one has to give away the protons. So this, if it is giving the protons, one proton to this one, okay, that is if water is acting But for your understanding, this is the autoprotolysis. Autoprotolysis, in the sense water itself, okay, on its own, protolysis. On its own, it can be acting like both an acid as well as base. One is giving away the proton and the other one is accepting protons. So there is autoprotolysis, or you can also call it as self-ionization. They are undergoing by themselves. Okay. So this is about the amphoteric nature of water. So one important property of water is they are both acting like acid as well as base. So this is about the amphoteric nature. The next one of the property, very important property again, that is it can undergo redox reaction. So water can be acting like an oxidizing agent, or water can be acting like a reducing agent sometimes in different reaction in different ways. So if you take the example of water combining with the metal, electropositive metal, best electropositive metal, that is sodium, which is highly reactive. So sodium, if it is added to water, you see that there is sodium hydroxide formed with the liberation of dihydrogen. Let me write the reaction for you. So here, if it is reacting with an electropositive metal, you can take any of the metal examples which have a positive charge. Okay, so here I'll take Na, which is said to be electropositive. If it is reacting with water, then the products formed would be, what would it form? So it forms NaOH with the liberation of hydrogen gas. So here in this reaction, you can see that H2O, that is water, is being reduced to H2. Reduced in the sense, what is removed here? Oxygen is removed. So if the oxygen is removed, it is said to be undergoing reduction, right? So here H2O is reduced to dihydrogen. Right? So this is one of the reactions where you can say that water undergoes oxidation as well as reduction reactions, and this reaction can be also a source of dihydrogen production. So production of dihydrogen can be done by this reaction too. Okay, so this is one of the examples for redox reactions where water molecule is reacting with an electropositive metal and then the hydrogen gas is liberated. Even if the simple reaction which takes place in our daily life, if you talk about the photosynthesis process, photosynthesis happens in the presence of sunlight, right, or chlorophyll, in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. Okay, so what does it give out? It gives out glucose, it forms glucose and then some amount of water, and the main constituent is oxygen, right? So here oxygen. So if you have to balance, here C6 and then here oxygen will be 6, here it is 6, 12 H2. Okay, now out of these 12 molecules of water, okay, you see that how many of them is converted into oxygen, whereas 6 remains as it is, right? 6 molecules of water remains as it is when you compare it to the reactant water, and there are 6 molecules of oxygen which is formed, right? That means half of it is being converted into oxygen gas, right? So here what has happened? It is being oxidized, right? Oxidized and formed oxygen over here. Okay, so here there is oxidation of water taking place. So that is how even in our daily life there is oxidation and reduction reactions happening with water. So water can undergo redox reactions. One more example, if you take fluorine gas, in the presence of fluorine gas also water can be reduced. Okay, so here water can be oxidized. Okay, so here this forms F minus and then it gives out H plus ions. So these will be the ionic forms, and then oxygen gas will be given out. This is just the same reaction but in the presence of fluorine. Okay, another type of reaction where in the presence of fluorine also this can give out oxygen. So here hydrogen, this one is oxidized to oxygen gas. Okay, so here this would be 4H plus 4F minus. Okay, so if in this reaction, if it is giving out H plus 4, H plus ions, then obviously it has to give out 4F minus because it is ionizing. That's why I put 2F2. Okay, so that it gives out the same amount of ions here. Okay, and that's what I said. So in the presence of fluorine also hydrogen or water can be oxidized to O2, like just how it is in the photosynthesis reaction. So this is how, these are some of the examples for understanding about the redox reactions of water too. So water can be undergoing oxidation as well as reduction, okay, in the reactions. So this is about the amphoteric nature as well as a redox reaction. Let us move on to two more chemical properties of water. Now, as I told you, water has a very high dielectric constant, which means the capacity of water under electric field that it can absorb or it can, attain more amount of electrical energy during that particular time. So that's why we say they have high dielectric constant. So due to this absorption of electric energy, they can actually dissolve many other compounds. Now, for example, you can take ionic compounds as they are polar. They both can exchange their ions and it will be dissolving, right? So they can easily dissolve ionic compounds. Even as I told, covalent compounds can be also dissolved by hydrolysis or the water, okay? So this is due to the presence of high solvating power. Solvating in the sense it can dissolve many other compounds. That is due to the high dielectric constant. So water can exhibit hydrolysis too. Okay, so starting with an example, if you take phosphorus pentoxide, okay, P4O10, okay, here, if you treat it with water, now what we have to do? We have to dissolve this particular substance, right? So here, if we try dissolving it with water, okay, this H2O react with water, or this water tries to dissolve this phosphorus pentoxide, and then it forms an acid, that is H3PO4, which is this acid, that is phosphoric acid. Okay, so when this phosphorus pentoxide combines with water, it forms phosphoric acid. So this is one of the examples for the hydrolysis of water, hydrolysis reaction of water. Another one, if you just take an example of silicon chloride with water. So silicon chloride is SiCl4. So if you try hydrolyzing them, okay, in water, that is silicon chloride. So here it forms silicon dioxide, okay, and then HCl would be the byproduct. So here also it can dissolve and form silicon dioxide, and then HCl is being formed over here. So if you have to balance this, here P4O10, okay, here 4 into 3 is 12, so here 6 into 4 becomes 12. Silicon chloride, Cl4 is there, that's why 4 HCl, and then 4H, here it is only 2H, so 2H, okay. So this is how you balance the reaction. So these are some of the examples for the hydrolysis reactions. Even if you take an ion, that is nitride ion, N3 minus. Nitride ion is written as N3 minus. So if you try dissolving it, okay, it forms ammonia, NH3. So preparation of ammonia can be done by hydrolysis reaction. So ammonia will be in the gaseous state here. So ammonia is formed with some ions. So here there is an ion reacting, and that's why ions have to be left out. So here it is 3 minus N3 minus. Obviously here also it should be 3OH minus, which is being left out. So ionic has to be balanced. Ions has to be balanced here. So 3OH minus here. So there are 3 hydrogen. 3 hydrogen plus 3 hydrogen becomes 6. So here it should be H2, so that it becomes 6. Okay. So these are some of the examples for the hydrolysis reaction. So hydrolysis is due to the solvating power of water. Solvating power will be high due to the high dielectric constant of water present. Okay. So this is one of the property which water can have. Okay, that is the hydrolysis reaction, and the last one is the hydrates formation. Now what do you mean by this hydrate formation? Suppose if you have some salts which is dissolved in water, what do? You crystallize them. Okay, you recrystallize and form crystals. So we say they are hydrated salts. For example, copper sulfate .5H2, that is a form of crystal, which is a blue color crystal. So it contains 5 molecules of water, that is water of crystallization. So this is how they form their own hydrates. That's why we say it is copper sulfate pentahydrate. Okay, so when you have the solutions, when you try recrystallizing them, they form crystals, and that's why we say they are hydrated copper sulfate, hydrated ferrous sulfate. Okay, so that is in the crystalline form. So in the same way, water can be helped or useful in the formation of these crystals. So water is the main constituent for these crystals to be formed then by the aqueous solutions which they are dissolved and they are recrystallized. So hydrates formation can be of three types. Okay. So first one is a coordinated water. Coordinated water. So here, just giving you some idea of how it can form these water molecules which are bonded to this hydrated metal salt. Okay. So here, for example, if you take chromium with water molecules, there is 6 of them. So these are in one particular orientation, okay? Whereas the other ones, that is 3Cl minus, will be outside this particular orientation. That means chromium is being bonded to how many water molecules? There are 6 water molecules are present. Whereas these 3Cl minus will be separated. They won't be directly bonded to chromium, that is a central metal atom. That's why we say coordinated water, which means chromium in the center and 6 molecules of water are coordinated to that particular metal ion, where 3Cl minus will be outside that particular structure. Okay, so this particular structure writing you'll be studying in the coordination compounds chapter, which comes in the second year. But for now, you understand that here all the water molecules are coordinated to the central metal atom. Okay, it is not like here Cl minus in between it is present. No, nothing like that. All the hydrogen, all the water molecules are coordinated to the central metal atom, but that is the chromium atom. Second type of hydrate, that is interstitial water. Okay. Now, what do you mean by interstices? I told you in the last class, those if the metal atoms are present, the spaces between the metal atoms, okay, that is the interstitial space. So here water also can be present in the interstices of some of the salts. Okay, so if barium chloride is present, so water can be present in the interstices of these particular salts. Okay, so that is what it says. It is one type of hydrated salt. So here they are present in the interstices, and that's why we say interstitial water. Okay, and the last one is the hydrogen bonded water. Now, as you all know, copper sulfate has 5 molecules of water in it. So you write it as copper sulfate dot 5H2O, that is CuSO4.5H2O, right? But here actually the structure would be present as Cu, okay, which is directly bonded to 4 of the water molecules. So there are 5 of the water molecules which are present here. But out of this, copper will be coordinated to only 4 of them. Okay, and that's why we say hydrogen bonded water. So here these are bonded together, and then you have this. So this will be having a 2 plus charge, and here this will be copper sulfate. Here sulfate ion will be present. Okay, and then you have another water molecule which is outside of this sphere. So here in this particular hydrated salt, that is 5 molecules of water, only 4 of them will be directly attached to copper. Other than that, the one, that is H2O as well as sulfate ion, will be present outside the sphere whenever you write the structure. And that's why we say it is hydrogen bonded water. So there are 3 types which is to be just noticed here. That is, one is coordinated water. And the next one is interstitial water, which is present in the interstices of this structure, and then hydrogen bonded water, wherein they are directly connected to the metal atom. How many? 4 of them, and the other one will be outside that of the particular sphere. Okay, that is coordination sphere. So these are about the chemical properties of water. Next, let us move on to the study of the hard water as well as soft water. So talking about this hard water and soft water, as you all know, rainwater is said to be really pure, right? Now what happens as the rainwater flows through the earth's surface, all these minerals and salts, they get dissolved because water has a very good solvating power. It is a good solvent, right? So what happens? All the minerals and the salts will get dissolved in water and then they start flowing through the surface, right? Now, because of this, the water becomes hard. Now, there are many salts which can be present. So, mainly there are calcium and magnesium salts which are, dissolved in water, and they will be in the form of calcium hydrogen carbonates or chlorides or sulfates. Okay. So, these can be in various forms. So, mainly they can be in the form of hydrogen carbonates, or they can be in the form of chlorides or sulfates. Now, based on this, we say that the water is said to be hard or soft. So, if it contains less number of salts, okay, which is very less in minute quantity, then we call them as soft water. But if the water contains many number of salts or minerals which are present like calcium hydrogen carbonates, magnesium chlorides, magnesium sulfates, then we consider them as hard water. Now, because of this formation of hard water, okay, it cannot be used in laundries and all. As you all know, first of all, they do not form foam, right, or lather with soaps. So, if you try washing any clothes with hard water, what happens? There is formation of a precipitate which is called scum, which is a dirty white precipitate. So, if you try washing it with hard water, it is very difficult to clean the clothes because of the formation of scum. So, here hard water will consist of the salts, okay, that is mainly calcium as well as magnesium salts in the form of hydrogen carbonates, okay, or in the form of chlorides or sulfates, okay, or in the form of chlorides. So here, if they contain such salts in the form of hydrogen carbonates, chlorides or sulfates, then it is said to be hard water. So if it contains less number of minerals or without salts, then we call them as soft water. So due to this hard water, I told you during cleaning it forms scum with soap. So soap is said to be sodium stearate, okay, so which is written as C17H35COO Na. So here, if it reacts with hard water which contains magnesium salt, for example here. So here what happens? Here Na is being replaced by magnesium. Okay. So here the hydrophilic end which has Na, that is CO minus Na, will be replaced by Mg while reacting with the hard water, and Me is being given up. So this forms scum, which is said to be a dirty white precipitate. So during cleaning, if you use soap wherein the hard water is present, okay, during cleaning, they form a dirty white precipitate, that is scum, and hence the cleaning becomes difficult over there. There is no proper cleaning, and also we can't give it to laundries, as these boilers, big boilers, if you try cleaning them with hard water, what happens? This scum or the white precipitate sticks onto the surfaces of the boilers and the cleaning becomes difficult. So because of this, we have to remove these salts, right? So there are various techniques which are used. So based on the amount of minerals or the salts which are dissolved in water, they are mainly classified into permanent hardness and temporary hardness. So hard water can be of two types. One is the temporary hardness, and the other one is permanent hardness. Okay. So temporary hardness, as the word itself says, it's temporary, which means that it can be easily separated by the common methods. Okay, for example, just like boiling or adding some of the chemicals. But if you are talking about the permanent hardness, then it requires certain industrial techniques wherein the water can be cleaned or the minerals can be removed from water. Okay, so first one, let us see how this temporary hardness, or what is this temporary hardness and what are the methods by which we can remove the salts from water. So if you are talking about the temporary hardness, usually these salts, okay, that is calcium or magnesium salts in water, will be usually in the form of hydrogen carbonates. Okay, but if you are talking about the permanent hardness, these salts will be in the form of sulfates as well as chlorides. So it can be in the form of magnesium sulfate, magnesium chloride, in this way for permanent hardness. So those are difficult to be removed by the normal methods which we can easily use. So instead they will require certain techniques, special techniques to be used for the permanent hardness. But temporary hardness and the salts which is being in the form of hydrogen carbonates can be easily removed by simple methods. So let's talk about the first one, that is temporary hardness. Okay. So temporary hardness, the first method by which we can remove the salts in the form of hydrogen carbonates, okay, or how the salts can be removed in the form of hydrogen carbonates, that we will see. So the first method, very simple method which we can use to remove the salts is boiling. Okay, so by boiling we can remove the salts, that is calcium or magnesium salts present in hard water in the form of hydrogen carbonates. Now suppose if magnesium is present in water as magnesium hydrogen carbonate, okay, so how can we remove this by boiling? So when we try boiling this water which consists of this particular salt, that is magnesium hydrogen carbonate, what happens is they form an insoluble precipitate. So if you try boiling them, they form magnesium hydroxide with the liberation of carbon dioxide. Okay, now this magnesium hydroxide which is formed is said to be insoluble in nature, or they form a precipitate right down there. Okay, so here they are insoluble precipitate which is formed. Now what happens if they are insoluble? Easily you can filter them and remove it, right? So you can separate the filtrate as well as the other part. So here you remain back with the water. Okay, so insoluble, this precipitate is separated out by filtration, and the filtrate which is remained back is your soft water. Okay, so this is how hydrogen carbonate salts can be removed by boiling. That is a simple method which is to be followed. Now suppose calcium hydrogen carbonate is present, how do you write the reaction then? If it is boiling, so by boiling. Okay, so what can be formed here? Calcium carbonate will be the insoluble precipitate which is formed, and then carbon dioxide will be liberated and you have water. So water is being removed. So this is the precipitate, insoluble one over here. Okay, so this is one of the method by which you can separate the calcium hydrogen carbonates or magnesium hydrogen carbonate salts by the simple technique, that is boiling. The second method is a Clark's method. So usually these named reaction student or the named methods are really important, so they can be asked for the exams. So please make a note of this, that is Clark's method, which is very important. So this is also a very simple method wherein some amount of lime is added. Okay, so here if hard water consists of magnesium hydrogen carbonate, okay, so some amount of lime is added, that is calcium hydroxide, okay, slaked lime. Okay, so here what would this form? So here it gives magnesium hydroxide which is insoluble, and then also calcium combines with carbonate, and then you remain back with water. So these are the insoluble precipitates which will be formed, and later it can be filtered and removed. So mainly in Clark's method, your mind should strike the line here, line or the lime water. Okay, you write it as lime. So lime is being added to the hydrogen carbonates or the salts which are present in hard water. So totally the hard water is mixed with lime, and the products which will be obtained will be insoluble in the form of precipitates, and then later filtered, and then you obtain the soft water. In the same way, if calcium hydrogen carbonate is present, if you try adding lime to it, that is calcium hydroxide, then it forms calcium carbonate, right? And then you have water. So this is how you write the reaction. Okay, so this is how you write the reaction of the lime which is added to hard water. Okay, so here you have 2Ca, so it is 2CaCO3. Okay, oxygen is 6, here it is 7. What do we do? Here it is 6 plus 2, it is 8. 2H2O, hydrogen is 4, 2 into 2, hydrogen is 4. So here how would you balance this? This would be 2CaOH twice, then this is 2CaCO3 and hydrogen would be 2. Okay. So this is how we balance these reactions. So this is about the temporary hardness of water and what are the methods by which you can remove the salts present in water. Okay. So next we have the permanent hardness, which we will talk about it in the next class. Some of the methods very important. Okay. So see you in the next class, children.